You've just seen a photograph of my grandson. I took it about 10 years ago, and he had painted himself green because he wanted to be like the Hulk. Well, I'm assuming that you're not green. But what colour are you? And more importantly, when did you realise that you are the colour that you are? I've asked people this question many times, and I get very different answers depending on what colour you are. So black people are more likely to say something like, well, I've always known. Or of course there was the person who said, when I went to nursery school. Unfortunately it didn't end there. It was, when I went to nursery school and nobody wanted to sit next to me. Whilst if you're white, you're likely to say something like, well, when I moved to Birmingham into a multiracial area. Or my answer was, when I went to work in Ghana in West Africa. But of course lots of people say, well, what are you talking about? I'm just normal. I'm just normal? So what are you saying about other people who are a different colour from you? Now, of course, normality has a mathematical meaning, doesn't it? Yeah, and there are far more white people than people of other colours in this country. So it is mathematically normal to be white. But what are you saying about other people? My next question for you is about discrimination. Have you experienced it? And more importantly, how did you feel when you experienced discrimination? What has struck me most about people's answers to that question is the strength of their feelings. Some people felt sort of fear, so I got answers like fearful and anxious and bewildered. Some people felt upset or hurt or demeaned. Other people felt angry. Somebody even said furious, and one person said vengeful. Very strong emotions. Other people felt valueless, excluded, useless. Really horrible feelings and very strong ones. For me, I couldn't name the feeling. I just said kicked in the stomach. All very horrible, very strong feelings. Discrimination really affects people seriously. Now, if you said you've never experienced any discrimination, it's probable that you're white and probable that you're male, probable that you're straight, probable that you're middle class, and probable that you're physically okay. I'd like to share with you some experiences I've experienced and I've heard about. I was walking up our street carrying my little adopted daughter. She was about 2 at the time. She was mixed race, same colouring as someone from Pakistan, when a couple of girls from across the street shouted at me, "Paki lover." We took our kids to this rather posh campsite. My parents had a caravan there. And as we tumbled exhaustedly out of the car, I heard from across the campsite somebody saying, "Oh, they're black." Now, my adopted son Eddie went into the pub at the end of the road of his own, where his house is. And as he went in, this elderly woman turned and said, "Oh, we don't want people like that here." Now, Eddie was with Kat, his partner, and she's got a gob on her, if you understand what that means. And she turned to this woman and pulled a strip off her. I just wish I'd been there to hear what she said. Another story about Ed. Ed was telling me, he said, I went into this pub. Now, Ed's got shoulders, I mean, right out here. Why he's my son, I don't know. And he said, somebody came up to him in the pub and said, "Hey, do you want to fight then?" And I said, "What?" "Oh," he said, "Dad, don't worry, it's always happening." Always happening. So a neighbour of mine, social worker, got out of the car in a posh area of our town, and as he was getting out of the car, a boy cycled past him and shouted, I can't say the word, but it starts with N, at him. Oh yes, now Sue told me this story. Now Sue's deputy head at the time, and she was walking around a supermarket with her nephew and niece, and she was followed all the way round by a security guard. Why? Because she's black. And another story from Sue. She was in her classroom and a parent came in to talk to the teacher. She walked straight past Sue and went to talk to the teaching assistant. Why? Because the teaching assistant was white. She assumed that a black person couldn't be the teacher. So there were these two 18-year-old guys driving to a party, to a place not very far from my home, and one was white and one was mixed race. And of course, being 18, they'd forgotten to take a map with them, and they couldn't find the house they were supposed to go into. But it was summertime and they came to a pub and there were lots of people sitting outside. So they decided to stop the car and ask for directions. And they got out and walked towards the people sitting there, and they were met with this blast of racism. The white boy was completely freaked out. "Get back in the car, we've got to go home," he said. And the mixed race boy said, "What's the matter with you? This is always happening." This is always happening. One of the things that I'm trying to get across is that our life experiences, our day-to-day life experiences, are very different according to the colour of our skins. Just a couple of more little things to think about, coming from much younger children. A firefighter came to school one day, and this little black boy turned to his teacher and said, "I didn't know you could be a firefighter if you were black," because the firefighter is black. And if children don't see people like them as role models, they limit their horizons, they limit the things they think they can do. And one very sad little one, this is about a 5-year-old black boy, African boy. He was traumatised because of some of the awful, awful things that had happened to his family. Now, when you think about traumatised children, you think of them huddling away in the corner. No, he was uncontrollable, really disturbed, a real problem in the classroom. But no child should ever, no 5-year-old child, should ever be able to say, "Why don't any white people like me?" So I want to tell you about Denise. Now, Denise and I worked together for 18 months, quite a short time, but during that time we had a complete blast. We used to give training together. I would talk about EAL and she'd talk about Black Achievement, and it was always hilarious and really successful and everyone liked it, right until the very last one we ever gave together. And for some reason, well, lots of different reasons, it didn't go right. And Denise was upset afterwards, reasonably so, and she went home and she wrote this poem that I'd like to read to you. Yesterday I cried. I spoke to some people about what it's like to be black. Most of them weren't the same colour as me. They didn't see me. I don't know what they saw, but they didn't see me. I wanted to help them see that my colour is an essential part of who I am and what makes me, me. If they don't see colour, then they don't see me. Being black is core to who I am and what I am. Like being a woman, like being a mother, like being a wife, like being a sister. They're all part of my identity. I don't wear labels with wife or mother around my neck, but I wear my colour. I walk around in my skin. It's part of me. It's who I am. Yesterday I cried. I cried for every racist name I'd ever been called. I cried for my dad being a black bastard. I cried for my aunt being Kunta Kinte. I cried for my brother being a nigger. I cried for my parents sharing a house with what seemed like a million other people and warming themselves over an old paraffin heater, and they were the lucky ones. I cried for my uncle being told, "No vacancies here," I cried for every black boy and black girl in school, left unchallenged and not confronted for poor behaviour. I cried for every black child who begins with such promise and ends up a failure according to the system. I cried for every black child who is demeaned, put down and humiliated, for every black child who is ignored. I cried for every ancestor who was kidnapped, raped, enslaved, tortured, beaten, murdered, cheated. I cried for my son not wanting to be black anymore. Spencer was 6 at the time. I cried for my son not wanting to be black anymore because black people don't get good jobs and because he was tired of being called poo-face. I cried for my children. I really cried for my children. I cried for my daughter. I cried for my daughter calling herself brown and my son telling her she's black. I cried for so little changing over so much time. I cried for every little box that ever needed to be ticked so I could be an ethnic group and be assured that services are fair and free from discrimination. I cried for every person that can't, or won't, see colour. I cried.